Hello, good people. I hope you're doing okay out there right now, wherever you are in the world and whatever you're dealing with. So, we have a monthly community called The Portal, and every month, one of the offerings that the community receives is a 90-minute live broadcast with me. For about the first 30 minutes of that broadcast, I will go deep on what's going on energetically, what's showing up, specifically aimed at our portal members. So, in a way, kind of like an energy update, just focused on our members. And then we do an hour of questions and answers where I get to interact with the community and we get to have a bit of a community conversation with everyone from all over the world. Well, this past Saturday, we did our 90-minute broadcast, the Energy Tune Up, and the first 30 minutes just felt really pertinent to share publicly. So, given everything that's going on right now, we thought we would put this first 30 minutes of the broadcast out for you in case it resonates with you, it helps you, and we send it to you with love. So, hope you enjoy. I want to invite you to do something with me. So if you've never done this before, we're just going to do a few scales, singing scales. And it's not a singing competition. This is not The Voice. So don't worry about the sound that you're producing. The point of the exercise is just to produce some sound. So if you've got people near you, you might want to do this very quietly if you're shy, but I just invite you to sing this scale with me and just let your body produce the sound that comes, okay? So we're going to start with ah, and we're going to go up. Ah, and again. Ah, and again. Ah. I'm going to go down a note or two. So let's think ah. Let's go down to ah. Let's go a little lower. We're going to start with ah. 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 Now we're just going to hold one note. We're going to do it like a hum. So this is the note I'm going to do. You may want to choose a different note that suits you, but we're just going to hold the note for a moment with a hum. And we'll do it one more time. Okay. So these are they can be very heady times with everything that's going on in the world, with the level of emotion and feeling that you may be in reaction to as a sensitive, as an empath, even if you in your own world are pretty good, pretty stable, perhaps good much of the time, you might be in reaction to the shock wave that's going across the planet. But equally, there will be many of us who are directly affected, either because of our own circumstances or because of loved ones, people very close to us. So what I'm noticing with all the people that I'm speaking to of late, whether they are friends, family members, colleagues, friends I know through this work, you guys reading your comments in the portal, and just kind of word on the street, really. Word on the street that comes through your house via Zoom or some form of technology if you're in quarantine, is that I'm not really meeting anyone who is completely unaffected by this time. Even those people who, put their hands up and go, you know what, I was kind of built for quarantine, or my life's not that different. Even those people who are not having a reaction to the quarantine itself, are feeling the energy of the world. So I always do a few scales myself before I do anything like this, before I go out on stage. It does a couple of things. Number one, it warms the voice up. But number two, it really grounds you in your body vibrationally. So I was just doing a few before we came onto this call, and it was interesting because I got the clear message, yeah, everyone, you should all do that because it gets you into your body and it takes us out of our head. So I think at times like this, we can go up into the mind or thoughts or out of our body as a reaction to everything that's going on. It's quite normal. You know, it's fight, flight, or freeze. You can fly out of the body. You can fight what's going on by disappearing. You can freeze as well. So that's going round. So, you know, that's just another thing that you can do in a 10-second, 20-second moment. If you find yourself feeling a little off balance, you can just literally, wherever you are, you can even do it with people around you. You know, whenever I do anything like that, one of our cats particularly is always like looking at me like this, and you never know, it might have the same reaction from your partner or your child. It's never a bad thing to make a room a little bit surprised that something unusual is happening. It wakes everybody up. So if you find yourself needing to come back into your body and just get out of either your mind or a spin or change the energy, this is one of many things that we can do in a very short space of time. Because I'm aware lots of you, for example, you might be homeschooling right now, so you've got the kids, which means you don't have a ton of free time or the luxury of being able to take an hour to yourself very easily. But the other day, someone asked a question of this. We're doing Elevate at the moment, which is also why I decided to sit here. This is the area of the room that I've been sitting in to do our Elevate program, which even if you're not in the program, everybody can access the first class for free. It's called Own Your Intuition. So if you didn't check that out, please go to elevate2020.world. And Noah, I know, is going to put the link underneath this broadcast for you so that you can access it. And somebody asked the question the other day. She was saying, it was a question we didn't get to answer in the broadcast because there were a lot that were submitted. And she said, what do you do if you're homeschooling and you don't feel like you can get away and get peace? And what I've said, what you will have heard me say other times before, is sometimes if we're in a room and we can't leave the room, but we want the energy of the room to change, we have to help direct the energy of that room or show up in a bigger way. So it's like if you had several years in your life where you learned not to tell the truth at the dinner table because of how it affected the dinner table and how everyone looked at you and said, you can't say that, and you got judged. So you learned to shut up. There comes a point in your own healing around that where you realize that your silence is sometimes what hurts you more. Meaning, if you have to stay sat at that dinner table, you staying silent and being privy to something that you're not enjoying and not being honest about how you're feeling without judging the other person. You know, you don't have to say, that's a terrible opinion, John. You can say, John, I see it very differently. You know, I hear how you experience it. I'd love to share how I experience it, which is very different. And bringing yourself into the room. And so equally with the kids or with whoever if you're in a quarantine situation with people where the dynamics aren't great, or you're finding that you're just a bit out of sync with those people, if those people aren't willing or able to give you the space to have your own moment to process, which of course in the case of kids, especially younger kids, is going to be part of the deal, you then can steer the consciousness into the group and see how the group reacts. And so with your kids or with anyone that you're with, another thing to try and do in these overwhelming times when you're all stuck in a house together
is to try and influence the consciousness in the room and try and influence how things are done. And that's not normally going to happen through having a conversation about the seventh dimensional angel that just told you about something that's going on the planet, but it's going to happen through experiences that we can all connect with. And music is one of those. So for example, when we sing, when we produce melody, when we produce different notes, it just bypasses the thinking mind. So, you know, it might be with your kids, if your kids are going crazy, do something crazy they're not expecting you to do. Suddenly do something that gets their attention. Turn into a wild animal for yourself, not to entertain them. Just turn into this wild animal in the room and they'll just kind of stop for a second. Because, you know, kids are usually tapping on us to get our attention when they're needing some direction or some stimulation or some engagement. So if they're tapping on you harder than you're comfortable with, or you're not finding ways to have a moment to stop that tapping, change your own energy, do something different, do something surprising, just to shake up the game for everybody. And by the way, I'm not really, you know, I'm aware that there are so many aspects to homeschooling that we would need to cover in a whole conversation if that were the case. But I'm not so much speaking about the kids in your life. I'm speaking about all the people in your life. The one thing that the Z's keep saying to me is there are two things going on. There's a grief process, which is not just to do with, you know, the virus and the kind of specter of death that keeps getting waved in our faces through, especially the media, to be honest. It's more the grief of what was normal suddenly being taken away almost overnight, and the whole world feeling a bit lost because certain normalcy has been removed. So it's that side of the grief process that everybody is in. But they also said there is an extraordinary innovation and creative energy that will only be showing up right now in quite a small way. So perhaps 20% of you will be feeling glimmers of this, or really strong grounded energy around this. I mean, if you are a creative and you're used to kind of birthing things, being creative, and you have space in your life to let the new come in right now, it will be a pretty strong time. If you're new to creating things, or you're new to creating this business you want to create, or it's a new idea and this is the beginning of your path, you might be getting pieces and glimmers. But the one thing I wanted to share with you that came to me right before we started today, and this was a real message: these are tender times. These are tender times. And that means many different things, but there are two different ends of that scale. We tend to think of tender, or I'll share what it means to me because it may be a little different for you. You know, if I hear the word tender, I think vulnerable, soft, delicate, needs nurture. I tend to think emotionally around that word. But what was kind of coming to me right before we came onto this call was it's tender in every way. There's a tenderness around the emotional energy for people, which means even if you're quite robust, other people might be a bit more vulnerable or a bit more tender. So that's going to affect you in a different way. You might be cool. You might be like, I feel great. But I am noticing that a lot of the people I'm interacting with are a little different or a little off or a little, it's good to kind of have that in mind. But equally, there is a tenderness around our creativity right now. So whatever it is that we're birthing, being creative with, wanting to bring into the world, let it be tender. Let it need nurture. You know, when the baby is first born and it's in that first couple of months, we're not all there going, come on, walk. You know, we all kind of know, yeah, the walking's probably going to happen somewhere between 9 and 18 months, depending on the baby. We're not going, come on, baby. We're keeping it close. We're treating it with a lot of tender love and care because we recognize it's a sapling at the moment. It's just breaking through the earth. It's not a tree yet. It's not ready to walk. It's not ready to hold its own in quite the same robust way. It needs shelter. It needs nurture. It needs feeding. So I want you to bear that in mind with creativity. For example, it could be quite easy to get frustrated creatively at the moment. It could be easy to go, oh, I've got this idea, but I don't know how to make it work, or I can't do anything until this whole quarantine's over, or why am I not getting more? And what's always good to just pay attention to is to ask if that frustration around momentum is really to do with that creativity, or is it to do with, oh, I'm a bit frustrated. Why am I a bit frustrated? Oh, this is how I'm dealing with my reaction to this time. Oh, I'm a bit mad about this thing that's going on. I've just been watching a bunch of conspiracy documentaries, and now I'm looking at the world with different eyes. Now I'm mad. So I'll funnel that into my creativity. So this is really what our energy mastery is. And it's complicated. You know, for all of us who are in the human body, I think our energy mastery is being able to put ourselves back in a position where we can get the best out of ourselves and the world and that day in any given moment. And we're constantly going to have to bring ourselves back to balance. That's part of the game. It's part of the deal here on Earth. Someone recently, I made a comment to somebody in my life and said, wow, you're always so balanced to this person. And they were like, no, I'm not at all. I find balance in these meetings I have with you. And I thought it's interesting because I understand why this person wanted to see this person as only ever balanced, or they assumed because this is the only way they ever see that person. Then if you looked at the two of them, you're like, of course she would see him that way, because she is not generally, she's generally a bit more chaotic in her energy. So she would see him as balanced because he's different to where she's dominantly holding herself whenever you see the two of them together. But I thought it's interesting, isn't it, in our society that we still have an undereducation about looking after your balance on any given day is one of the greatest challenges of being human. And it's a great gift as well. It's, you know, especially if you're in a privileged enough circumstance that you aren't that day fighting for your survival, fighting for food, you know, not sure whether you're safe. If you're not under those kinds of life-threatening stressors, and you have the ability to pick and choose your focus, pick and choose some adjustment at least of your immediate environment in order to support your balance, you can get yourself back into a place where your energy is emanating. So instead of being like, oh God, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on over here? Oh. Oh yeah, that feels better than where I was 10 seconds ago. I'll do that again. Join me. And the thing I'm heartened by about this period of time on the planet is, as a very hungry for emotional intelligence teenager who, for any of you who know my story, I was, you know, a binge eating bulimic, taken to Weight Watchers age 10. You know, my food disorder started very early on. So I was clearly hungry for something. I thought it was sugar, but that was the cover story. I was hungry for emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, and energetic education, because that was the part of my body that I couldn't balance. That was the part of my life that I just couldn't balance. And it was so invisible and so unseen and so unspoken about that it was this thing that was haunting me. What I love now, 35 years later, because I'm 43 now, I look at this world and I'm like, wow, 30 years ago, there was the beginning of a movement around mental health, well-being, emotional intelligence, people speaking about their feelings, people speaking about wellness techniques. I remember yoga coming to England I became aware of it in the early 80s in England, and it was this weird thing. And we were all like, yoga? I mean, I was a kid, but that's what I heard the adults saying about it when my mum started to go to some weekly yoga classes in the evening. She wasn't like a big aficionado or anything. She only did it for a while, but she was trying out this new thing. What I'm heartened by regarding this time that we're in now is the fact that human wellness is becoming a priority across the board. And we're in a bit of a crisis point when it comes to planetary health, human health, and the health of our human system. However, the piece of this period of history that I feel we are all here for, signed up for, incarnated on Earth for, is this moment where I know most of you who tune into this community or other communities or are advocates for this in your community, is we are here to be both students and teachers of it. And I don't necessarily mean a teacher on a stage to tens of thousands of people, although I'm not belittling that either. That's an important role. And group gatherings like that are important. And I also get that whenever you see a big gathering like that, in a way it validates it in society's mind. No one questions the validity of music because we're aware of stadium concerts and things like that. So I'm always really pleased when I see things like these big, Oprah's having her big wellness stadium tours, and whenever you see a speaker out there with a big audience, it's always great because it kind of just puts it in the mainstream. But that's not going to be the norm across the board. The norm across the board is the everyday conversation that we can have with someone in our life that won't talk about dimensions or wellness techniques, but because we have a grounding in it, because we aren't afraid of it, because it's become somewhat normalized to us, our frequency, the way we talk about it, the way we listen to that person, the way we hold space for that person's thoughts and feelings, it gives a vibrational holding to what they're going through. And that's enough. And we're all doing that. And then others among you, us, do this work as teachers some of the time. You know, sometimes we are leading a yoga class in our local community, or we are teaching Qigong online, or we are somebody who's out there answering people's questions about self-development or self-growth, or we are someone who's really good at teaching people about money, about how to get over the fear of money, the emotional reactions around money. There are so many different areas of our life that need wellness and need healing. And these are very tender times, but these are also times where you're going to be more called to service and called to action than ever before. And that doesn't always look like having to start a Facebook group. It doesn't have to be on scale. For most, it will be the smaller conversations. For me too, it's interesting. You know, I can do things like this where there's a good number of us around something like this, but then it's no less or more important than the conversation I can have with, you know, someone I meet on the street that day who I know and who is clearly going through something. And maybe I can just hold a little bit of space for that person. But here is the other point I want to make. Equally, because these are tender times, a really good healer, whether you see that role being something that's part of your job description, or whether you see that as your unofficial title and you have some other job description or role in your family, but you're kind of the family healer. You're kind of the one that people will go to try and increase their wellness or their emotional understanding. It's really important to look after yourself too. So you can't always leave the room for 2 hours, which is what you feel you might need, but you can insert your truth into the space if the space is asking you and your truth to back out in an aggressive way. What I mean by that is there are times when someone will say, please leave the room, you know, and it's clear they don't want you there. Mom, go away. We're watching, Mom. And it's like, oh, great, phew, I've irritated them enough that I can leave the room for 2 hours. Or they want you to stay there and they don't want you to leave, but they want you to play the game the way they want you to play the game. And that's a big no-no. That's a big no-no. That's an old game on earth. Letting someone else's desire or will for you supersede your ability to be present in the relationship. And as I say that, I feel a little heart, because I'm sure there are some of you right now in situations with family members, perhaps with loved ones, where you're a bit forced into those relationship dynamics and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is very healthy. And it might be that this is the point where you have to insert and assert your truth into the relationship a bit more. You might think, well, there's no point because they're never going to hear me. I should just leave. Maybe. But maybe first you try speaking your truth. Not telling them what their truth should be, not judging them for their truth, speaking your truth. But equally, if they try and talk you out of your truth or judge you for theirs, you point that out to them. You go, I'm guessing you don't agree with me because you just tried to tell me that what I'm thinking and feeling is wrong. I would never do that to you, and I would appreciate it if you don't do that to me. And, you know, maybe the words go up a little bit from I would appreciate it if they keep coming at you a few times. Maybe it's I'm not going to stay in this room and have this conversation with you until you can actually be respectful of my beliefs in the way that I'm respectful of yours. I don't agree with your beliefs. They're very different to mine. But it's not fair that you try and bully me out of mine. That's not okay with me. That's not an even relationship. You're not the owner of me and my thoughts and my feelings. And if you think you are, then Houston, we have a problem. So there will be some boundary stuff flying around at the moment for some of you, not for all of you. And it's important to be able to protect your energy, your soul light, at a time like this, especially as you are going to be a guardian of that for others in the future. And you learning boundaries for you is seemingly a great thing for yourself, but it becomes a great thing for others. It becomes a great example to others. It becomes a great support for others when a few years later they're starting to go through their own boundary issues and you've kind of already been there, done that, gone through some of the harder lessons around it. So it is a tender time and there's a lot flying around and a lot of you are needed. And I just want to remind you that, yeah, we're needed, but that doesn't mean that we can be on 24/7. We're going to need the time and the space to replenish. And for any of you who are healthcare workers right now or who are on the front lines in some other way, you know, you're going to have to be practicing as many of your own techniques and ways of being able to hook out of the fear of other people and to be able to perhaps function in a more action-based way right now to serve what your role is, but also to reserve some of your soul energy for you and perhaps have your own private prayer moments, gratitude moments, and asking for help. You know, asking for help. You know, this is a real challenge for me today. Please, universe, help. Send me the support that I need, the energy I need, the grace I need, the people on the ground I need to help me. Because that's its own kind of challenge. So I think this is a good time for us to move to your questions. But before we do, let's just do a couple more arms together. So And like I said, we can, you can do this anytime. And if you have pets in your life, doing this or whistling when they're not used to it is hilarious to watch their face. I love doing it to our cat B, which is short for Beyonce. The other one is called O, which is short for Oprah. Don't even ask. That was a joke to Stephen that he thought was a good idea. So I ended up going with it and then deeply regretted it when we had to take them to the vets a few times. And they asked for their full names. So they would phone me and they'd go, hello, Oprah and Beyonce are ready to be picked up now from the vet. If I ever meet them, I won't tell them that story. But B looks at me like she doesn't know what I am whenever I do scales or whistle. So try it with your kids. Try it with the spouse that's arguing with you about something that you kind of just start doing scales in their face and see what happens. I'd be curious to know how that goes. So if any of you are in the Portal Facebook group or on the comment underneath this video, if you try that out and you have any amusing stories to share, please share, because we all need the humor right now too. So let's do a few ohms together. Oh.